good day to you all, my listeners and my viewers out there. I am sure you still remember our channel, Alfonso the Rothschild's Tutorials, a channel dedicated to helping all of us, no matter from what walks of life you are coming from, to help all of us have a better grasp of the English language, have a better grip, a better understanding of the English language, and how to apply it in our daily use, whether in business relationships, in romance, or some other kinds of interpersonal relationships, but especially for our daily communication and business purposes and various other kinds of interactions that require conveying information using the English language. So everyone is welcome on board. Today, our searchlight is beamed on the IELTS examination. If you are joining us for the first time, IELTS stands for International English Language Test System. It is an examination, an international examination that is necessary for those who hope to further their education outside of Nigeria, especially in the European Union and in the Americas. It is also required for those who want to pursue their profession, that is, deepen their career experiences in countries in the Americas or in the European Union. But this doesn't in any way imply that an understanding of the IELTS examination and how to tackle questions involved in this examination is only limited to those who are aspiring to sit for this all-important examination. No, this is not what we imply, because the IELTS examination essentially deals with the English language, and the English language is important to all of us who speak that language as a second language, and also even to those who speak it as their mother tongue. Because speaking the language as a mother tongue does not necessarily equip one to answer or tackle questions set in the IELTS examination without having a thorough understanding of the techniques involved in resolving or tackling such questions. So what this implies is that our discussion today applies to everybody who has an interest in deepening his or her knowledge in the English language. Let us take a look at what we are doing today. IELTS Task 1. For intending IELTS students, it is already clear that the Task 1 examination examines the candidate's ability to present an orderly report based on an economic model. The Task 1 examination usually focuses on the ability of the candidate to analyze values, to analyze variables that have been presented in an economic model, what is usually referred to in a simple term by saying basic tools for economic analysis. These basic tools include statistical tables like the one that we are about to analyze today, and it also includes statistical maps and pictograms. It includes pie charts and bar charts of various kinds, including the simple bar chart, the multiple bar charts, and the component bar charts. And it includes graphs comprising single line graphs and then multiple line graphs. And finally, it includes map reading and analysis. That is, read and interpret maps, read and interpret a certain map, and then be able to report your interpretation in grammatically correct English that goes straight to the point without having to make your report wordy. This, no doubt, is knowledge that everyone who has passed through the four walls of a school needs to possess. In other words, skill in the analysis of economic variables or values is one necessary. It is a skill that everyone who has passed through the four walls of a school should acquire. I know that possibly somewhere in your mind you are being inundated with the question, what are economic variables or what are economic values? When we say values, we mean an economic issue that is capable of being measured. It is a value because it is possible, it is capable of rising in quantity or falling or decreasing in quantity. So, such a value is capable of having moments of high and moments of low. And once such values are measurable, we refer to them as economic variables. There are so many that we cannot start enumerating them. But it is enough to say, for instance, that the number of male children enrollment into primary schools in a given area within a particular period, and how much this quantity of enrollment or number of enrollment, how much it has risen over a period of, say, 6 or 5 years, or how much it has fallen over such a period, is an example of an economic variable. It is capable of being measured and represented using statistics. Statistics are values that have been reduced to figures. That is, values of an economic nature that have been reduced to numbers are referred to as statistics. So what we have here are examples of statistics. The figures we have on this table are examples of statistics. Now, the number of housewives in Nigeria who will opt to take a paid employment for 4 hours each day if the government has decided to give a special allowance to such housewives besides their salaries. The number of housewives who would opt to relinquish their function as housewives and work for a period of 4 hours each day is an example of an economic variable. If we measure that number per year, or for a period of 5 years, or for a period of 10 years, it's an example of an economic variable. Values of an economic nature can increase or decrease within a period. So there is always a period of measurement. It cannot increase or decrease indefinitely. So if we want to measure the number of housewives who are willing to take a part-time paid employment for 4 hours each day, considering a pay package, an incentive or an allowance that the government has promised to pay them besides the salary they'll be earning for a job. The number of housewives who are willing to share their duties as housewives with such a paid employment per period of time for a period of 5 years. A measurement of whether that number or value is increasing or decreasing is what we are talking about. It's an example of an economic variable. But let us focus on the IELTS tax 1 writing. Good. The tax 1 writing is for IELTS academic students or IELTS academic candidates. When I say academic candidates, I mean those IELTS hopefuls who hope to further their education outside of Nigeria, in the European Union, or in the Americas. Those are the ones who sit for the IELTS tax 1 writing. This tax 1 writing is followed immediately by the tax 2 in the same examination. And both taxes have 1 hour allotted to each. Both taxes have 1 hour allotted to them. So the question now is, how should the IELTS candidate tackle this examination? First, the IELTS tax 1 writing. The IELTS tax 1 writing has a word count of 150. That means you are to write about 150 words. But that shouldn't frighten you, because you may well write up to 180 or 190. In fact, it's advisable to write above 170. Write between 180 and 195 or 190 so as to be able to express yourself very well. Then, how much time should you advisedly spend writing the 170 to 190 words? It's advisable that you spend 20 minutes. 20 minutes. By so doing, you will have 40 minutes left to tackle the IELTS tax 2 writing, which is an essay form writing that will require more creativity, that will require more brainstorming before you do your writing, because the IELTS tax 1 writing already provides you the information. All that you need to do is to do the writing, so long as you have the requisite skill. Now, what are the other issues involved in the IELTS tax 1 writing? Perhaps you are asking, what kind of writing should I do? Should it be conversational or should it be formal? The answer is, your writing should be formal. Remember, it is not an essay, it is a report writing. Your writing should be formal enough to be suitable for an academic writing. And besides its formality, you should also remember that because it is not an essay, it is not a task where you would demonstrate your power to command the English language and be wordy. No, it is a summary. So you must have the skill involved in picking the relevant points and reporting them and avoiding unnecessary details. That is what you must do. It is necessary, therefore, that while you are still at home, before you face the examination, that you attempt this kind of writing several times and time yourself, and be sure that within 20 minutes you will be able to analyze a table such as the one that we have here, and then after the analysis, put your analysis in writing in the form of an academic report. And now we turn our gaze to this task that we have today, let us take a look. It is IELTS Tax 1 writing and subtitled A Statistical Table. What we have here is an example of a statistical table. I had already remarked earlier on that statistics refers to information or data that is presented in terms of figures or in the form of figures. Information or data that has been reduced to numbers. That is what statistics means. So when we talk about a statistical table, we are talking about a table as an economic model displaying variables of an economic nature. The first column of the table says city. The second column, date opened. Next one, kilometer of route. Next one, percentage per year in million. And we are told here on this side of the board, the table below gives information about the underground railway systems in 6 countries. That is the caption of the table, the information that we need to know about the table. The table below gives information about the underground railway systems in 6 countries. The 6 countries are London, Paris, Tokyo, Washington, D.C., Kyoto, and Los Angeles. Beyond this first table, we have the dates when the railway system applying to each city was opened. 1863 for London, 1900 for Paris, 1927 for Tokyo, 1976 for Washington, D.C., 1981 for Kyoto, and 2001 for Los Angeles. And the third column tells us that the routes covered per year by each of these railway systems in kilometers. The route covered per year by each of these railway systems in kilometers. 394 London, 199 Paris, 155 Tokyo, 126 Washington, D.C., 11 Kyoto, and 28 Los Angeles. And the last column of the table measures the percentage of these routes covered in kilometers per year, measured in million. Measured in million. Percentage per year of the kilometer route measured in million. That is the table. I'm sure that is not difficult. The numbers have been arranged in such a way that they are clearly understandable. The purpose of the basic tool for economic analysis, or the purpose of a statistical tool, is that it helps us to get information at a glance, especially when there is no time enough to give all the details involved about a given economic value or given economic variables. And what is needed is the main facts, the major issues at a glance, the highs or the lows, as the case may be. That is when such economic variables are presented in a summarized form, which we refer to as an economic model. A statistical tool, like the one we have here, the table, is an example of an economic model. Now, our next task is how to analyze these variables. This is the point that you must note. In a report of this nature, like I had already insinuated, unnecessary details are not needed. Give only the information that is relevant. The relevant information include the highs, in other words, which values are rising over what period, which values are falling over which period. That's the highs and the lows. You may mention some intermediate figures, but too much detail is naturally frowned upon and will make your report too wordy for an academic writing. So when you mention the highs, you mention the lows, and then mention any comparison between the values that is necessary. Now let us go on to talk about how to do the actual writing. Source. The source of the table is the IELTS Cambridge English textbook. That is where this table was taken. The prompt tells us what to do with the table. It says, summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. What I have underlined here are the key takeaways. The key takeaways from the prompt. It tells us what to do and where our attention is to focus. We are to write a summary, but not a detailed analysis. A summary. That is a report. By doing what? Selecting the information and reporting this information. The information we are to select are the main features of the table. Then, where relevant, we should make comparisons between one figure and another, or between one value and another. To be able to do this, naturally, we need to wipe this part of the board to create space for the report. Now, in case you have a question on what I have said so far, I invite you to drop your question on the comment section. Alternatively, you can WhatsApp me using the number 091 333 1790. 091 333 1790. You can drop your comments or suggestions on WhatsApp, and then I'll respond to you as soon as possible. You may also leave an email for me using Alfonso the Rothschild Tutorials at gmail.com. Alfonso the Rothschild Tutorials at gmail.com. A report of this nature essentially comprises 4 paragraphs, and the paragraphs are to be compact. So the writer must know how to move straight to the point and not rigmarole. Don't keep going around the same matter without really talking about it. The first paragraph, you can call it the intro. The first paragraph, you can call it the intro, is a paraphrase of the heading, of the statistical table. A paraphrase of what I showed you here earlier on. The table presents the railway systems in 6 countries. Good. Now, that is the caption, and you should learn how to paraphrase it in the first paragraph. Then the second paragraph, you present an overview. The overview means what you can see, what you can gather from the table at a glance. In other words, what are the movements of the values, which values are rising and which are falling. After that paragraph, which is the second, then you move to the third paragraph. The second and third paragraph can be called the body of the report. In the third paragraph, you now analyze your findings from the table, quoting figures to support your analysis. What this means is that the second paragraph should be without figures. You should just make statements of the observable facts from the table. Then, in the third table, which together with the second comprise the body of the report, you now make your analysis, a detailed analysis, as brief as possible, quoting figures to support, figures from the table, of course, to support the analysis you are making. And after that, in the fourth and last paragraph, you can make any comparison that you didn't make in the third paragraph, or report any other relevant value that you hadn't reported in the third paragraph. And that brings an end to your report. Now let us take a look at what we are supposed to do. A glance at this table tells us that the Tokyo railway system, established or opened in 1927, had the highest percentage of kilometer routes covered within the study period, which is 1,927, with 155 kilometer routes per year. It was able, that is the conveyance of passengers or commodities by this railway system went so frequently that in each year it was able to cover 1,927% of the routes per year. We are told 1,927 million. That is what it means, percentage per million in a year. Now, apart from Tokyo, we also notice that the Kyoto rail system, established in 1981, was able per year to cover only 11. It covered only 11 kilometer routes per year and was only able to generate 45%, that is 45 million of such routes per year, making it the lowest. So if the Tokyo system was the highest in percentage, then the Kyoto system was the lowest. The rest are in between. But it is also necessary to notice that apart from the Tokyo rail system, that the London or the Paris, rail system established in 1990 covered a kilometer route of 199 per year and was able to generate 1,191% in million of that route per year, coming second after Tokyo. Now, these are really the information that we need. And with this information, equipped with this information, we are now ready to start our report. All right, we have the first two paragraphs written, and naturally, because of space, we need to study what we've written and then continue with the two final paragraphs. Now, the first paragraph, I must quickly point out that by convention, IELTS report writing and essays use the table, the block system, the block system of paragraphing, but not the indented system. Good. So it says the table depicts, or the table shows, if you like, the table depicts the railway systems in 6 countries and the percentage kilometers in million covered by each railway system per year. That is the intro. This intro informs a reader about what the table is all about. Then this is the overall. Know that in the overall, we say what we can find at a glance from the table. The values rising and the values that are falling, that's the highs and the lows. Overall, the Tokyo railway system recorded the greatest percentage kilometer per year, while the Kyoto system occupied the base of the table. We need not to say anything more in this paragraph, because what is relevant are the extreme values, the highs and the lows. Having mentioned the highs and the lows, it is understood that the other values are between these two extremes. So we will now wipe this and continue with the third paragraph. Remember that the third paragraph, together with the second, from the body of the report, and it is in the third paragraph that we do the detailed analysis, quoting figures to support our analysis. All right, my dear viewer and listener, I hope you've been following the progression of our report. And so